good. Okay. Progress. Okay. All right. Welcome everyone to the May IABC quarterly meeting. Today's topic, we are discussing LGBTQIA plus inclusion at camp. And so the way that this conversation is going to work is really just like a informal discussion. I mean, sometimes we have guiding questions, but really the education committee is just like, let's get a participant-led conversation. And so I know that I think I'm really proud of some of the things that our camp does. It's not perfect. And we also have some, probably going to come face to face with some issues we haven't anticipated. But yeah, this is it's a fraught topic, but it's something that we owe to our community to really address to the best of our ability. What are some? Did anyone like see this topic and was like, yes, I absolutely have this question. I need some guidance.
I have to say, we have not had this issue to confront before. So I'm more looking to see how to confront it when it comes up. And if we can be prepared for it, that's what I would like to get from this.
Yeah.
I can start with like a recent win that I had at our adult program. So we have a former camper who is a trans man, and it was our adult retreat is ages 18 and up, and he's 18, and most of the time I do the rooms for our adult retreat by age and gender. And I got really lucky that there was a non-binary person who was also more or less close to this camper in age, who I checked with them both, and they were like, yeah, I'd be so okay with this person as a roommate. Yes, I'd be so okay with this person as a roommate. And that was just a really nice win. I felt really lucky that I had no idea this person was non-binary to begin with. And I have an optional pronouns question on the application. And so they included they, them as their pronouns. And I was like, all right, I got a job for you. So that was a nice recent win. And I didn't hear anything negative from either of them. They both seemed like they were pals, and it went great. But both of them, I think they would have been okay with a roommate of either gender, honestly. Or at least the trans man, I think he would have been okay with a roommate of either gender.
I think the biggest that when we say issue, I don't want that to sound like this is something like that is negative or like something that we are being forced to like make modifications for. It's just how do we and I think the thing that first thing that comes to mind for a lot of people is that my camp, just like my camp, has a male and a female village. And so where do you have someone, and what's your policy when someone comes to camp and does not conform to a traditional notions of gender presentation, and wants to, room in like has the sex characteristics of a female but wants to identify as a male, and so wants to stay with the males, but their genitalia is different than someone with the sex characteristics of a male. So I think those are some things that came across a lot in our workshop. We didn't have a dedicated space to talk about it. It was just something that kind of someone like raised their hand and brought it up. And then it was a lot of like crosstalk and a lot of people say we do this and we do that. There's really no dedicated space to talk about it. And I'm just putting that out there because I feel like that's what I've heard a lot is, like at burn camps, like most of us are like, we know that we don't want anyone to be othered. And so when people have like, they have pronouns or they, them, or like they dress in a different way and things like that. I think we're all very good at like, yes, this is this person. They are a unique individual. It's more like the logistics, like what bathroom do they use? Where do they sleep at night? Is anyone else like curious about that? Is that
Well, I mean, I think for us, it was something that was kind of thrust upon us versus planned. And I think the good thing about this conversation is the idea that people can plan for it. So, like Judy says, they haven't had any campers yet who have identified um, in that community, but I think preparing for it will make sure that you're not caught off guard. We were able to pivot pretty quickly um, in terms of, a kid came to camp. They talked about identifying as a girl, though they were born male, and we kind of pivoted and had them in a gender neutral, as we said, cabin, which their mom was fine with, and they were fine with. And we've had that offering in our housing, like when the application is being completed by parents, there's an option for being in a same gender cabin or a gender neutral cabin. So that option is there. I think it was just lucky that there was an empty cabin at our camp to be able to like pivot so fast. So I guess having something that you've thought about is helpful so that, if that wasn't the case at your camp, that you didn't have, so, like a random extra cabin sitting around, that you would be able to have a way to take care of that. Because a lot of times kids may not say anything to their parents. Parents may not be accepting of what they're identifying as. But like Maddie said, I think making sure that kids feel like they belong and that they're seen is important. So how do we make sure that happens? I also know in the current state of the world, or America at least, that there's a lot of places that have laws on the books that go against this. And I know I've had this conversation with Kristen Quinn from Utah that, there that would not be allowed at their camp. So I think that's something that people need to take into account as well.
Kelly, can I ask you, like, just from a like very logistic standpoint, how did you guys navigate then that cabin? Like, did that cabin group just sleep somewhere separate, but then they went to the age group that they preferred? Or, like just logistically, like how did you guys
Yeah.
like do
And
that? And then in terms of staff, like did you have, like how you staffed it as
yeah,
well?
yeah.
and a follow-up question, how do you decide who sleeps there? Like, what if
Yeah.
only one camper is like, I want to be in gender neutral housing?
And that's exactly what it was. So number one, the way we set up our programs is you like rank your programs, and you don't go to your program with like your cabin. You go to like it's a mixed, all the programs are mixed. So, if you're going to archery, it's kids, like of all ages from various cabins go to archery at a certain time, and other kids are at whatever. So that part didn't necessarily matter. When it came to like cabin time or that kind of one-on-one, those core groups are hanging out with each other. The kid was old enough that they went to that like area where that unit 3 is, and a lot of those kids just hang out outside. So then they would hang out outside with the kids. And that kind of worked out really well. As far as who slept in the cabin, it was the kid and and that was like the rule of 3 that got a little tricky because you had to always make sure someone was there. So like in the middle of the night, it was like you couldn't go to the bathroom, which that would be for me, but here we are. So they had one woman and one man in there, and both of those people like didn't care where they slept and didn't feel um like it was anything. There isn't a bathroom in that cabin, so they didn't have to go to the bathroom in that cabin, if that all makes sense.
I think one of the obstacles to creating a gender neutral space at my campus, one space, but also like that whole like, well, kids are just gonna wanna have sex and like make out in the cabin if you do gender neutral. Kelly, did you confront that at all? Like, were some people like, this is so inappropriate?
Um, not necessarily, because again, the only people in the cabin were the kid. Um, and the kid doesn't like, they don't like to be real around a lot of people anyway. Sometimes every time they sign up, I'm surprised they're still coming, because camp isn't really their thing, but I think their mom thinks it's great, which it is, but you know what I mean. So it's just the kid and the two counselors. So I don't think that part was ever really an issue. We did have an issue, funnily enough, not at all funny, the same year that one of the counselors for the camp that we go to, so Camp Duncan is a YMCA camp, and not anymore, but previously those counselors would be in the cabins with our campers and our like volunteer staff. And so there was a transgender man who was supposed to be in one of the boy cabins, and the counselor, our volunteer counselor, had an issue with that. And so that was not fun. And that kid actually the first year ended up staying in that wasn't a kid. I mean, he was a kid. He was like 18 or 19. But that guy ended up staying in the gender neutral cabin as well. So I think, we had someone come up and out and talk to, the following year at our staff development about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I felt like some of the response to that situation was not ideal and not very welcoming or making sure that everyone felt included. So, but I think as the people who run the camp and as the organization, we are wanting to make sure that everyone is included. So that was kind of our message.
So, Maddie, a quick like half joke, half real thing that my boss Joe likes to say is, well, if there's gay campers in a cabin, we have no idea because it's all boys in there, all girls in there. Like, what's stopping them from making out all the time or doing that too? And it's like, there's still adult supervision at all times. So that part doesn't change. So there's that at least.
I'm curious what you all have. So Kelly, you just mentioned having like a gender neutral option on your applications. But like I'm even wondering about mine where like we ask for gender and we also have pronouns as an option for people to fill out. And with some of the people that I work with, some volunteers that are more old school in their thinking, we've kind of had this discussion around like a new parent of a new kid that we don't know could put whatever they want on that application and we would be none the wiser. And they could just, put how their child identifies and that could happen. And kind of this like debate around like, do you include sex and gender or just one, or is having the pronouns kind of enough of an option for people? And we don't right now ask if like we don't have a gender neutral option, which I think is too bad. For cabins, like we're split male and female, also space is an issue for us. I would love to implement that. I know I would get some pushback, and so I'm trying to kind of figure out how to navigate that. But I'm just curious what all your camps do in terms of actually on the forms, what information you ask for.
So sex is something that you have to include to have an account on Camp Doc, which is what I've heard that it's something don't even need to really be asking that, but you can't leave it blank on Camp Talk, and that's a registration platform we use. We also ask for gender and preferred pronouns. And we say like, what is your gender? And it's a blank box. Like we don't give them options. We let them like say, like type it out. So there's lots of MAILs at camp. They're males. They're postal mail. Yeah.
Took me entirely too long to spell that out in my head.
I thought you were saying like an acronym. Yeah.
I know. I was like, what does that stand for? I think the thing I struggle with about this conversation is some of it is cultural, about just to be completely transparent. And I know this is being recorded, so I'm going to choose my words very wisely. About coming from the South. So like there we run into a lot of just like the culture and the nature of where we're located. I think too, like, because I use CampBrain, and like CampBrain is super smart and has all these like filters and things, but I have not asked for pronouns because we only have male and female cabins, and there's no way that I can offer that. And so I guess I'm looking for like thoughts or feedback, or maybe another idea about, should we be including that so that we're able to, even if it's just able to reach out to the parents and say, hey, we want to recognize and hold space for your camper, but just want to be honest about the limitations of our facility and how we're set up, because it just feels like to open the door, but then not, not to be able to provide anything. I really struggle with that, because we only give people, a binary option. You can male or female, because I just can't do anything about it, if that makes sense. And like, I know that's just where we are right now, and we're having lots of conversation. I've had lots of conversations with our volunteers. We have a large LGBTQIA population of volunteers, and like we talk a lot about that and like recognize it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have a question or a thought, but I just kind of struggle with that, like to know like that it's like this thing that we can't really support, but we want to be it's just all of that is where I think we find ourselves.
And I think that's a common problem. And I think there's two things. There's one is, if there was a kid who, and you say gender, if there's a kid who put their gender as female on the application, though they were born male, would you automatically say, no, they can't stay in the female cabin? And I think at baseline, your foundation has to decide what they want to do or not do in terms of that specific situation. And realistically, and I know I'm going to sound like hard when I say this, but like the foundation can make that decision and then tell the volunteers this is the decision that was made. And the volunteers, they may not agree with it, but for the week that they are at camp, that is what we're doing, and they are all on board. If they don't want to volunteer, then that's up to them. But that, I mean, again, going far into like your whole foundation has to be on board with that. And we've had this conversation before where there's been people who's can't even offer that on at all because their board won't agree to that. So, I mean, I know there's a lot, we're not all working just like one person who's an ally and feels strongly about making sure everyone's included isn't the only person making the decision in that matter. And, that obviously, again, is the world that we're living in. But I think, in terms of volunteers, they need to be on board with what the plan is that your foundation sets out. And if they are, they are, and they're there for the week. And if they aren't, then they don't need to come.
To me, I'll comment on the pronouns thing, because I think even if you acknowledge that you can't move somebody from cabin to cabin if their pronouns are different than matches their assigned gender at birth, at least you can call them the right thing or use them the right pronouns throughout camp. Or if you have like especially non-binary kids, and it's like, a kid who was assigned female at birth is non-binary, and you ask, can I still put you in the girls' cabin? And they're like, yeah. I think a lot of times they're still most comfortable in a sleeping room of their assigned gender at birth not to be overly generic. But yeah, we had a non-binary kid who was fine in the girls' cabin for the last couple years. And so when we made a point of saying, like, you know, it's so easy for the counselors to say, okay, girls, you know, we're all going to go to the dining hall, it's lunchtime. So we talked about in training, making sure you're saying, all right, campers, or okay, kids, or all right, y'all, just using gender neutral language in the cabin can go a long way.
All right, I'm gonna be very naive here because it's all kind of new to me to be open to it, but what does non-binary mean?
That they don't identify as either male or female. So there's the kind of a thought that gender is a spectrum. And so they've decided that they're not one or the other. They're just not one or the other. They're somewhere in between.
Okay. Interesting.
So those are a lot of people who use they, them, or they might use she, they, or he, they. It's all over the place.
Okay, thank you.
Mackenzie, to go back to your point, so we use Camp Brain too, and I had a similar, and your point to the south, sometimes we aren't always as progressive in Canada as we like to think we are, or some of us are, so I get what you're saying. And when I went through the implementation of Camp Brain with their staff, and we kind of had that similar conversation, because on the phone, when I first came, what you did, Maddie, like I put gender as a, you can write whatever you want. And Camp Brain has awesome options, but he kind of said to me, like, if you're giving it as an option, but then you don't actually have a solution for that, like if they're allowed to put something different, but then you can't accommodate that, then, you know, don't give them that option. So we have put gender as a binary. So you have to select female or male, which I don't love, but to Kelly's point of like our board and what how we have to decide as an organization first, which is next on my list. We have that, but then we have included pronouns the last 2 years, to Val's point, and we've had a few kids that have put different pronouns than you might expect them to have. And one thing that we've done that our volunteers are really great about is our, like, the name tags we make, like they're pre-made with the name, but they can take them out. And a lot of the kids, because the campers are way more awesome and progressive than adults, they write their pronouns on there. So then the volunteers know and will refer to them by those pronouns. And usually for the kids that have been coming, like we have 2 examples of 2 campers that were born female, identify as male now, and but still want to be in the female cabin because those are the kids they've come to camp with and grown up with. So we're able to exactly use their pronouns. One of them has changed their name. We use their new preferred name, which is awesome. So I feel like there's ways that we're being accommodating. This conversation is good because I'm always trying to get ahead of like what happens if we have a new camper that it's different, and then we run into the like, no, you have to be in the cabin that's your, you know, how you were with the gender that you were born with, basically. So I would love to get ahead of that as opposed to have that come and then blow up in our faces. But yeah, it's interesting just to see kind of how everyone navigates it. And I think clearly people are navigating it outside of burn camps as well, but I feel like it's such a unique piece with burn camps because, you know, if the kid can't come to burn camp, it's not like they can just go to another one necessarily. There's not a lot of other options.
Well, and I think
That was
that
a
exact point, we're trying to preach this, even with your scars, you're still, you know, like you should still be accepted. You should still be loved. You should belong to a community. But okay, you have scars, but like you're non-binary. So no, you know what I mean? Like it's not the same message. The kid who came the first time and they had brought, sorry, they had brought a women's swimsuit to wear, and the counselor was like, what do I tell the kids when they come out with the women's swimsuit on? I was like, tell them they don't make fun of the other kids for scars, so why are they going to make fun of him for this? He was like, oh, that's a great plan, great plan. So I think it you know, we're trying to be space to exist in, and all of them should have a space regardless of, you know, how they identify.
I want to say two things. One, Margot, that was a huge selling point for me to my board about like, where are they going to go if they can't come here? And then, and the board is still, you know, anyway, where are they gonna go if they can't come here? And also I think, I don't know if this is the same for the group, but I've had much more issues convincing my staff that this is the right thing to do than the kids. So that's just a frustration I've continually had. And I put our policy in the chat, but we ask for gender, and families will, like, someone said they identify as he, they, although they were born female, he, him. So we do say, like, you can bunk in the cabin of the gender that best, like, you feel comfortable with, but we don't have gender neutral housing. We just are not able to accommodate that. Those are the limitations of our facility, and I'm very sorry. And usually that, like, this, we've had this policy in place for about 4 years, and that's been okay. Because at least, like, they can come and they can go by the name they want to go by, and they can be in the cabin that they feel comfortable with.
And so do you have that on your application? Like which cabin do you want to be in? Or you will call and ask someone if they've, yeah,
I will call and ask.
yeah, yeah. that
When
makes-
someone identified as they, them, as the gender, I called and I said, would this person feel more comfortable in the male or female village? And like someone said this, like, they were, the sex assigned at birth was female, and so they chose to stay with the females, and they have for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So
Have you ever come across opposition from the other campers from having somebody in their camp that's not in their cabin, that's not necessarily what they expect?
no, in fact, funny story, this, we did have an issue where the camper, who I will refer to as J, the letter J, was not getting along with his cabin mates. And we were like, oh my God, what if it's gender-based bullying? Like, what if they, like, so we investigated. I mean, no one does it. Like, Jay was the recipient of some lighthearted, like, male to male teasing, and just like typical, like, are you annoyed by 13-year-old boys? 13-year-old boys annoy everyone. And so Jay asked to, bunk with the girls. And we said no, but we did a thorough, like, do you feel safe in your cabin? Like, do you, like, what is happening? Because if it had been gender-based, like teasing or bullying, like, we would have, like, nipped that in the bud. And then, like, do you feel unsafe in your cabin? No, he just felt annoyed with the behavior, the typical behavior of 13-year-old and 14-year-old boys. But that is, I said before, like, we're kind of coming up, like, he has asked to switch villages in the middle of the week, and we're just kind of like, I mean, we said no, and I definitely have had some, like, what, I mean, but you got to draw the line somewhere, like, it was our assessment that he was just being, I don't know, it could have easily happened if he was in a girl's cabin. It just didn't fit in with the girls who would wanted to move to a different cabin. So, and we don't really allow that unless there's, like, some severe conflict going on. But no, Judy, we've never had, this will be his 4th year at camp. The only questions have ever come from the counselors. No parents have called us and been like, what? And this camper has been with the same group of boys for the past 4 years. So, like, it's all just like, hey, this is Jay. Oh, he's in our cabin again.
I have a minor segue question for you all. Still related, but a little bit different. So we've modified our dress code to be as gender neutral as possible, and talked about, like, we allow spaghetti straps at camp, but we say no to crop tops and midriff. Fashion has changed a lot in the last couple of years, and kids are doing a lot more midriff things right now. But like, for instance, we had some male counselors last year who wore the like muscle tees with the sides totally cut out. And I had to be like, please change your shirts. I can see your nipples. That's not allowed at our camp. Have you had to make any modifications or considerations to your dress code to go with any, I don't know, current trends or LGBT policy inclusion stuff? No?
Well, for our camp, we require everyone, we give each camper 2 shirts, and then usually some sort of like sweatshirt or long sleeve for like nighttime. And we require that they wear those all week. And we do like a laundry day and wash them. So that's kind of a way we kind of get away from any like midriff or exposing. We have had some people say that because of scar tissue and regulating body temperature, maybe getting some sort of tank top or something, because oftentimes our camps are the summer, so it's gonna be hot. But that was kind of a way that we maneuver, and then we just tell people to wear appropriate shorts that are covering. But I think that makes it, I mean, it's 2 shirts, they get a little dirty, it's camp though, so we just kind of go with it in that way. And then for the pool, I know that can be another tricky area. So we have rash guards that we require people to wear, and that makes it a lot easier. One, it's sun protected, but then oftentimes, you know, bathing suits kind of can be all over the place. So that's kind of a way to keep everyone decent.
We don't have a dress code. Now that you're saying that, I'm like, huh. We
We
don't.
don't
And
either.
yeah, we haven't run into too many issues, although funny that you say that, because last year we had a male counselor come that was very proud of his body, and we have camp t-shirts as well, and he, or maybe someone else as a prank, cut his t-shirt into like a crop top, and then he cut it further and wore it on one of our out trip days, and we had to talk to him and ask him to change, because that was an interesting point. But we don't have a dress code really to back it up, so that's an interesting thought.
I mean, our thing is that you can't. Sorry, I'm dealing with, you know, camp issues, deposits and things like that. We kind of say that when the dress code is that you shouldn't wear anything that is intended to arouse, you know, sexual feelings in another person. And that's really the extent of our policy. And also, like, you can't have things that like have like advertisements for alcohol and like no political statements on any side of the spectrum. But we've talked about this a lot because like last year, I mean, those little like the bathing suit bottoms, like the cheeky bathing suit bottoms, are very in vogue this year and last year with our teen girls. And like we gathered and we talked about it, and we're just like, if they're it's hard to police that. Yeah. And we just like, if we're teaching them to love their bodies, like no matter what the scarring looks like, and if something comes like one camper like says something inappropriately to another camper, like we can kind of be like, so what makes you think that it's appropriate? Well, she was wearing or he was wearing that. No, you know, like, and that's a conversation. But we don't post any pictures of anybody in, like, we try not to post pictures of anybody in bathing suits. Definitely don't post any like butt cheeks, you know. Like, they're cute suits, you know. I'm kind of like, flaunt it if you got it, but and it's hard not to like sexualize that type of stuff. So like, we're just like, well, if that's what they're wearing, that's what they're wearing. And like, we don't need to add a layer of like, that's too sexy for camp, because they feel comfortable in it.
Yeah, I totally hear you, because that's how our pool kind of is too. Exactly, where if they're out in the pool, this is their time to have their scars out and like on proud display, and you're in the pool and you're confident, whatever. But right, we do put like, please wear a one piece swimsuit if possible, but a lot of our campers might not even have clothes for the whole week, like clean clothes for the whole week. And so it's like, we know they're not going to be able to afford to buy a second swimsuit if their cheeky butt hanging out swimsuit is the one that they own, then that's the one they're going to wear. And that's just kind of how it is.
Does anyone have any other like pressing questions about policies, practices?
I guess I'm curious for those that are further down in this journey than I am. Like, were you all the advocates that like went and were like, this is what we need to do and put in place, or did you have someone else like championing it within your organization? Because I kind of tried to bring this up probably like a year and a half ago and got kind of shut down, and have since like just been kind of on the reactionary side, and now I'm like, okay, I guess I gotta start this up again. So I'm just curious if you all were the ones pushing this forward, or if you've had kind of other advocates, allies within your organization in terms of like staff, board, or volunteers.
I think for us, again, it was like really on the fly. And I was relieved that both the camp director and the executive director of the organization were completely on board and like didn't blink. No one even like, we sat down. I got the text from, funnily enough, a brand new counselor who like struggled to even think he was a survivor to like volunteer and volunteers, and this is what happens like 5 minutes in, and he sent me a text like, I don't know what to do. And so we got together and in 5 minutes came up with this plan, and there was like zero questions about it. And so I think that was super helpful, because the people at the top were 100% on board. And so then it was just like, this is what we're doing to everyone else.
Yeah, kind of similar. I think for us, it was the campers who kind of decided, and there was like a longtime camper who came out, and it started with the name change, and then it was the pronouns, and then it was like the full thing, like, yes, this is a trans person now. And so that made it easier for us, because we were like, of course we want this camper to keep coming. And for our executive director is also our camp director, and I think he generally knew that it was the right thing to do, and he just didn't kind of know some of the nuts and bolts. And so I have the benefit of one of my best friends is a trans guy, and he talked about his experience in grad school at a religious university, and how they were like very unaccepting of him in his like identity in general. And so it was like, we are not doing that. Absolutely not. And the crazy thing was, just mind you, that his program was to be a therapist. And I was like, this is nuts. So it was like, we're not going to pull the same stuff that this university did. Um, so yeah, we've been really lucky that I've got him as a resource, just like colloquially. He's not a camp person necessarily, but he's got, the lived experience. And just in the ultimate Frisbee community too, it's also like, that's my hobby. And there's a lot of gender inclusivity in ultimate. So it's just been like an relatively easy transition for us. And we haven't had to like run it by a board or anything either. We've just been like, this is what we're doing for camp, just so you know.
I was fortunate to have a mental health professional on my board at the time that I kind of talked to about, and the impetus was the same as Val's. Like, we had a longtime camper who was transitioning from female to male, and kind of said, the first year I started, he was with the female side, and he kind of said, I don't feel comfortable there. I want to be like I am a male, and so I want to be like, as a counselor, and he's coming back as a counselor in training, I want to be on the male side of the camp. And so I talked to the board member. She's not on the board anymore, but she was an advocate for that, and that was helpful.
Thank you. That's helpful. I think I gotta find my 1 or 2 people and work my way out.
I think also is that, I mean, I could really point to the best idea in Canada, but I know that Canada has a Canadian Camping Association. I mean, I'm sure that they, like, it's best practice for the American Camp Association is to make these accommodations to the best of your ability. And so I could really point to that as like, there's nothing in accreditation that says you have to do it. But this, the ACA's strong recommendation that like, this is the direction that camp is heading. So like, a lot of ours was like, do you want to be the camp that, yeah, is this a burn survivor? Let's get them to camp. Do you want to be the camp that is still holding on to this? Or do you want to be the camp that like other camps are like, that burn camp? I mean, look at what they do and we want to be like them. And that really spoke to a lot of our board members.
Totally. And I think it's
Yeah.
just the, you know, when it's like the 1 or 2 people that are loud that have been around for a long time. So then other people, even if maybe they disagree, aren't willing to push back. And when this came up a year and a half ago, I still felt kind of new. So I was like, ooh, how much can I push? And now I'm like, you know what? I've been here for a bit, sticking around for a bit. So, and this is helpful too, I think. You know, I think it's like to say, you know, to say other camps are doing this, and that's a good point though, to look at the associations and what they're doing. But when it's like, hey, other burn camps are also doing this, like, you know, we don't want to be falling behind that. I think that has a lot of sway sometimes with our camp people and board that have been around for a long time. So thank you.
Make it yours. Move in, get comfortable.
I think the thing too for me that like I always go back to, and this is when I find myself in some conversations with people that might be like oppositional, is like our program is to serve people who experience burn injuries. And we like for our program, we don't say, oh, you only had a 10% injury, your injury is less or more significant than somebody that has a 95%, right? Like we know people who, you know, regardless of percentage, all of that stuff, like some people are greatly impacted and some people are quote unquote less impacted. And so I think like also reminding people, because I remind myself like that is the connection point and that is the thing that matters amongst our community of young people, is like this is a community for people who've had a specific shared experience. And I think allowing the young people to lead that and say like the idea of like how you identify and all of that is secondary to the fact that you're coming here with a shared experience around a burn injury. And I think reminding the staff of it, because I do think like our young people always tend to be a little smarter and sharper than than we are, but they do want community. And like that is just one facet, like your gender or your identity, it's just one facet of who you are as a person. And so I always try to remind people of that too, that like our program is about serving burn survivors. And so we want to do that as best we can. So um that means that we want to provide an inclusive environment in the same way that we've been talking about, like dress and all of those things. Like it's all interconnected, but at the end of the day we're serving young people who've experienced a burn injury, and that is who we want to serve, full stop.
Anything else? Okay, if you will allow me to just quickly pull up a slideshow of announcements that we want to make before we conclude for the day. Right, so some upcoming events for the IABC on September 11th at 12 p.m. Central Time. We will have our quarterly, our third quarterly meeting of the year. This will be our camp debrief. It's a very cathartic experience for everyone to just, share your joys and then also the things that made you go, why do I do this for a living? And that would be via Zoom from November 12th to the 14th is Phoenix World Burn Congress. The IABC will have a presence there in some way. We're not sure exactly what that looks like, but we will be there. This is, if you're not familiar with what this event is, it is an international gathering of burn survivors. And just a really lovely opportunity for burn survivors to spend time with one another and to learn about their burns, about themselves, and also for providers and co-survivors to be part of that as well. So it's in Northern Kentucky. And then in December 11th will be our final quarterly meeting of the year. We'll be talking about programming other than summer burn camp, which is always the topic that people want to know more about, also via Zoom. Okay, I want to give an update on the Smith & Nephew partnership. And so Smith & Nephew, the wound care company, has multiple offices across the United States and Canada. And so they are, I gave them the information that every camp put onto that Google spreadsheet. And then in addition, I gave them the contact info for each member camp, because not every member camp filled out that spreadsheet, but that's okay. So Dave from Smith & Nephew will be sending that contact information to the local regional offices. You should expect to hear from someone saying, hey, how can we help? We have a group of Smith & Nephew employees that want to support you in some way. And so yeah, so that's in the works. If you have any questions about that, please email us at iaburnCamps@gmail.com. Kelly, can you talk a little bit about the ABA's Burn Prevention Week poster contest?
Sure can. So normally the ABA, when highlighting Burn Awareness Week in February of every year, they have a burn prevention poster contest that up until recent has been really focused on various people within burn, like burn centers making these posters, clinicians, providers, whatever it is, making the posters. The prevention committee really wants to shift that focus and give some ownership of this to the kids. And so is really thinking this would be a great way to get the kids involved, highlight some of their stories and, how they are thriving in a way. So, I know it's kind of sounds a little like contrary in terms of posters can explore themes like hope, strength, resilience. I don't know, like connecting that with don't, leave your pot handles out might be tricky. But I think just having the kids kind of give what they think about burn injuries on a poster is going to be probably the best. This may change in the future based on, the submissions they get, but they are willing to have as many submissions as any camp wants to put together. There's going to be a digital platform to submit the posters, so you're going to have to be able to scan it or take a picture of it to be able to submit it. And they're going to open that submission in the fall. So when that link comes out, we'll definitely forward it to everybody just so that they have that link. But I think if you are having an arts and craft type time at your camp, which I'm assuming everyone does in some way, shape, or form, this might be one of the things that people can work on during that time.
Okay, Mackenzie has linked to a PDF describing the poster contest in more detail in the chat, and then we will also send that out to a membership. And that is it for announcements. Excuse me. Is there anything else that we need to cover? It's 12:56.
Good luck with everyone's summer camps. Can't believe it's that time that the next
I
week
know.
is done. Wild.
Truly. I think Camp Courage is happening this weekend. UNC.
Oh.
Yeah. Yep. We're not until the end of July, so got some time. But yeah. All right, well, it's as always lovely to see everyone and have such important conversations. We will see you in September.
Thank you very
Thank
much. You have a
y'all.
great
Take
day.
care.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I wanted to say something too.